tear, it falls and hits the ground. A tree, it falls without a sound. A bird, it calls and sends you home. A man, he sits in the cold all alone.
Hi, Allison. Thank you so much for joining me on The Joy of Sunflowers. Please introduce yourself a little bit more.
Hi, well, thanks for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today. So, I am the founder of Miscarriage Hope Desk, and as some of you are probably already imagining with the name of the company, Miscarriage Hope Desk, I was led to start that after my own fertility journey, which included a total of 6 miscarriages. And while I was going through that, I realized that there just weren't the resources that I wish there had been. And I felt as if I just wanted to create those, and I needed to, and I felt called to. So that's what I've done with Miscarriage Hope Desk.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And it's amazing how we kind of like feel called to do these things. And we spend all that time researching ourselves, and then we're like, oh, well, other people are probably doing this too. So I should probably do something helpful and put it out there so they can all like just go on there. I know there's
Yeah.
quite a few women in this community who just get message after message every day, and then they're like spending all their time messaging, and I'm like, you could start like a website or something where it kind of has that so you don't
Yeah.
constantly have to answer messages. It's lovely to hear from people, but then we all have to deal with our own loss as well at the same time. So yeah, I don't know if you had something similar happen with you where you were getting messages all the time, but there's plenty of ladies who do, and they're just like, I'm overwhelmed. But yeah, thank you so much for joining and yeah, for starting that Hope Desk, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, wow, someone's actually like put this stuff together and made it, not as overwhelming to go through.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go into your journey right from the beginning. Did you always want to have kids, or was it something that kind of happened?
Yeah, I think I always knew I wanted to have kids, but I think I had them a little later in life. And, so I think in my 20s, I was kind of like, when, like, I used to say like, oh, maybe I'm not sure. But by the time I think I hit like 30, I knew for sure that I wanted them. And then when I met my husband, it's something we really connected on is, wanting to have a family, and really knowing that that was, a big part of what we wanted out of life and kind of a shared value for us. So yeah, I would say it was, yeah, definitely wanted a family.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
When did
You go into, what's that?
Oh, I was just saying, when did you meet your husband? But you go on.
Yeah, in 20, well, now I always have to remember the years. I think in 2015. And it was one of those things, like we just thought that the hardest decision would be like, well, do we want 3 kids or 4? Like these are the decisions we thought we were going to be faced with. We had no idea that we would have any sort of fertility issues, both very healthy, or at least thought we were. And, I still think we're very healthy. And but in starting to when we got married, we actually waited a year. So we moved to Puerto Rico for the first year of marriage, which I highly recommend for a fun place to live. But yeah, we waited a year to start trying, but then knew that we wanted to, and so started trying. It didn't take us all that long to get pregnant. And actually that first pregnancy, I didn't even realize I was pregnant because I thought I thought I had had a period. I think looking back, it was probably some implantation bleeding. I was like tracking my cycles very closely, so I'm not exactly sure what went on there. But 2 weeks later, I had very heavy bleeding, like a gush of blood, and went to the emergency room. And found out I was pregnant, but then it is, so it's like this weird thing of it all happening at once, of like finding out I'm pregnant, but also finding out I'm like, but am I really just pregnant? Because did you see what just happened? Like, I don't think I am. And so it was just like this very like whirlwind of a day. And so it was a lot to process and really hard to go through. But at the same time, it felt like, well, I listened to my doctors, right? And they said, oh, one miscarriage, not that uncommon, to continue on trying. So I did. But the next pregnancy, miscarried again. Luckily, after 2, we kind of started doing some testing and moved forward with that. Found out I had antiphospholipid syndrome. So in some ways felt, I guess, some relief to have an answer and have a protocol, like something I could do moving forward that would help improve my chances. So antiphospholipid syndrome is basically a blood clotting issue that can lead to miscarriage. And so then I had a protocol of being on blood thinners during my next pregnancy. So I was really confident in that pregnancy because I felt like, again, like we had our answer, like the answer we needed. Unfortunately, that one, I ended up miscarrying as well. So that was really devastating because I felt like I'd finally, done everything right. And, we made it further along with that pregnancy. I want to say it was like a little over 10 weeks. And I also get really bad morning sickness during my pregnancy. So 10 weeks of pregnancy feels like a lifetime of pregnancy when you spend the whole time like in bed throwing up. And so after that, I was just really devastated and really didn't know what to do moving forward because I didn't feel like I could keep doing the same thing. I'm like, look, we tried this thing, it didn't work. Like, I can't just keep doing this to myself. And I did even tell my husband that I'm like, look, like, I don't think I can keep doing this over and over again. Like at some point, I don't know what the number is, but like, it's not an unlimited amount of miscarriages that I can have before I'm going to be, just emotionally done, So, I guess I was going to say at that time, I decided to pause, but there was like, after that miscarriage, I did have another pregnancy, another miscarriage. But through that whole time started thinking, gosh, I don't think this is, I was starting to feel called for something else. I really got quiet and like listened to myself. I really feel as if God spoke directly to me and said adoption. It was so strong. Like in the beginning it was quiet, but it got to the point where it was just like all I could hear, all I could think about. I just knew in my heart like that was our next step. So in some ways it doesn't even feel as if it was a decision because it felt so certain that was our next step. And I don't even know how to explain it. But I started going down the path of doing, the paperwork for an adoption. That actually went quite quickly. I know everyone always says, oh, the paperwork, it's so hard. But I think finally having something that I could do and I could, control, and it was a very, black and white, fill out these forms and you'll, be on the list. So I started doing that. And once the paperwork was done, I thought, it'd probably be a few months, maybe several months. And I knew that there were a lot of issues that could come up with adoption as well. But 2 weeks after we were approved for adoption, we weren't even so I wanted to work with an agency that like kind of was not who we did the home study with, but we signed up to be available through our home study company as well. Just figured why not. So before we even had a chance to sign up with the agency we wanted to work with, we got a call that there was a baby waiting at the hospital. So we had 2 hours to drive there, stop by baby, buy a crib and some diapers, like a car seat. That's the one thing you have to have. So anyone that's pregnant and panicking that they're not prepared, I always say, have a car seat. Everything else, I mean, even at the hospital, they gave us a few, like they were able to find some outfits and, diapers to send us home with. So it was very, kind of very magical, and it actually was around the same due date that I would have had with the 10-week pregnancy. So it really felt kind of meant to be, like it was one of those things that I never would have seen it happening that way. Like I wouldn't have even been able to imagine that, on my due date, I would be like, having my son would be born on my due date after I'd gone through that loss. So, that felt very right and was was great. And then it was actually right after that pregnancy. I know everyone says, oh, after you adopt, it'll just happen so easily. And, you won't even have to try. And right after that adoption, I got pregnant. But I always like to mention this miscarriage. It was, I think, one of my shortest, if not the shortest pregnancy, but I did miscarry. So for the people that say that adoption is like this trick to getting pregnant, it doesn't necessarily work. It didn't work for us. I miscarried again. We decided at that point to like really on purpose stop trying for a little while, like get through the newborn phase before we decided how to move forward. But we knew we still wanted more of a family. So got through the newborn stage, decided to talk to some fertility clinics, see if there was anything that they might be able to help with. Went through a few fertility clinics and then landed on one that actually discovered my husband had sperm DNA fragmentation, which could also be impacting them. And so that made sense to me because that would be a reason to do IVF and use like the ICSI sperm that could perhaps avoid some of the fragmentation that they were seeing with him. So decided to move forward with that, and in doing that, ended up with no viable embryos, which I think was a bit of a shock even to the doctor, because all along we have been getting pregnant, so to not even get a viable embryo really didn't seem to match with like the issue that we were having. So that was devastating in its own way. I know a lot of women that struggle with multiple rounds of fertility treatments and IVF or other treatments. I could now understand like that loss, like very much felt like there was no miscarriage in there, but like it definitely felt as if there was a lot of loss and devastation through that process. Decided to again kind of put things on pause for a few months, but this time to really kind of go all in and try and, and this whole time I had been trying to, don't stress and relax and eat healthy and do all that. And, so always doing those things. But really like kind of let's take 3 months and just go all in, like cut out 100% of everything, and just really see if we can go for it. And then, because at this point, let's just give it one more go. And then, I don't know how many more of these can we do. But in that few month period leading up to attempting a second round of IVF, I got pregnant on my own. And that ended up being my, full-term biological son, right in the middle of COVID. But, there's pros and cons to a pregnancy during COVID. And especially since I was already in bed, sick, throwing up. Yeah, so that was my biological son. And then after him, we again decided to wait, knowing that we wanted to try again. But we, one, just give my body time to recover from the pregnancy, get through the newborn phase. But we did know we wanted to try again. And at some point through all that, my mom had a really bad accident and got really sick. So that also kind of set us back. So I was dealing with all of that. But at the same time, I felt as if, yes, I wanted to give my body time to rest and recuperate, but as much as they say, don't worry too much about the age, I feel like every year I'm kind of like, I knew I wanted to try again. And so we tried a few times. I'm trying to think the exact year. So it was when my biological son was 2. So I had like a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, or I guess a 3 and 2-year-old probably at the time. And ended up getting pregnant, kind of did. And, I tried to like, okay, what did we do with the other successful pregnancy? Like I took a month, I did a lot of meditation and, cut out, and again, I was eating healthy the whole time, but really like, let's, dial it in on the supplements and be very like, good about doing all of those things. And got pregnant, was really excited about it. And actually the whole time, and this has been the interesting, like, I don't know, a lot of interesting takeaways with what I've gone through, but it's crazy how each pregnancy, I just completely almost forget about the other ones. And I get so positive. I guess it proves like what a positive person I am, that I almost feel like, oh, like this just couldn't happen again. And I guess I thought like, oh, well, with the last one, my body figured out what to do. And like this one will just, there won't be any problems. And although I do think there's this like phase of like waiting until like the last time you had a loss. So for me, I think the latest loss was like kind of that 10-week one. So I was like, I made it to the 10-week mark. That felt good. We did the genetic testing. That came out good. We found out the sex. It was a baby girl. I felt like we'd crossed all the hurdles. And I was feeling really positive and was sicker than ever, which if I've learned anything from my losses, it's that, it doesn't matter how much you throw up. That doesn't mean that it's going to be a successful pregnancy, unfortunately. And that pregnancy, I went in at a little over 12 weeks and found out there was no heartbeat. So that was last fall. So that one was really devastating just because, I don't know, I guess each one you think you're not expecting it, but also, I don't know. I'm still in the phase of figuring out my next steps, but it did feel a little more final than some of the others. I just think this is something I've started to like talk about with Miscarriage Hope Desk of like, when do you know? Like, how do you know what your next steps are? Do you know that you're done? Do I want to pursue adoption again? Do I want to, try again? And just kind of figuring that out. This pregnancy was a little more difficult in that I had I had 2 toddlers. So me being sick for 2 months and in bed, like, it's not like, it's not just me personally now that like, oh, I can go all in and like devote everything to going through and trying everything. And I know so many people in my community like go through that, right? Of like, already have a child, so like going through fertility treatments or going through these things it's not just them going all in, it's like the whole family making that decision. And so this time definitely felt like more of it's not really a sacrifice because it's something I want so bad, but it did feel like more of, it doesn't just impact me anymore. When I'm, in bed and mommy can't do as much, I'm so sick. So I think it just, it definitely changes the considerations from what they were in the past, which has been interesting to kind of grapple with. But so that's where I'm at with my pregnancies. But also on the flip side is, I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old that are like the most amazing little boys. And, for them, like, wouldn't change anything in the world because it really like is, even better than I ever could have imagined in terms of like having them in my life. And if that's what it took to lead me to where I am now, is going through all of that, I'm going to choke up now, but I would do it again in a heartbeat. It's totally worth it. So.
Gosh, wow. You are just talking to you. You are the perfect person for having a site called Hope Desk, like Miscarriage Hope Desk, because yeah, you're just so positive and I can feel that. And, you said you weren't, you had the hope during your pregnancies, and a lot of women don't. Like I definitely don't. I don't have that hope. I do hold on to some of it, and like my kids will get excited, and then I kind of feed into their excitement. But a lot of the time, I'm just freaking out. I'm just so.
Oh yeah, I mean, believe me, there's fear, there's anxiety, there is like doing the. Like, I'm like, how many times should I Google this thing before it? Like, I've got to take away Google, like all of that stuff. Yes, believe me, there's that too.
And I've got to say, like, knowing when you're done, that is a hard thing, because obviously it is something you want and you want it so bad. And like a lot of the time as well, like with your kids, I don't know if you have the same as me, but my kids want me to have more kids, lots of kids. They want so many kids around them. And and I'm wanting to do that for them, but I went through 2 losses, and then I was like, one more go, and then I think I'm gonna have to just not, because I can't emotionally do that and physically do that, and I get really sick too. And I said to my husband, I can't do that, and because you can't be a mother like in the capacity that you want to be while you're going through that, while you're emotionally going through turmoil and like treatments, and you've got all those hormones. Like, it's really difficult to be you, let alone be a mother for someone else. Like, be anything else. So I mean, for me, I was just like, this is it, and if this doesn't turn out, I don't know how well I'm gonna go. And like, the closer I get to the due date, the more scared I get, because I'm like, if anything happens now, I'm gonna be a mess. And it's just like, continual. But yeah, I think knowing when you're gonna, sort of stop is a hard thing, because obviously when you get there, sometimes you're like, oh, we can give it one more go, just depends on the person.
Yeah, no, and because there were parts like, through all of those losses, there were definitely ones where I was like, this might be the last, like there's definitely times when you say like, oh, this is the last one, or, so there is some of that happens too, of like, you can't make your last decision until, you don't know the full picture at the end game. So, yeah.
Yeah, so
It's
true.
a lot to think about.
Yeah. I mean, you've had a lot of different like timed miscarriages. So can we sort of go through the processes that you went through? I mean, we have a crappy decision to make, those 3 choices that we all get given. So have you experienced like each one, or which ones have you experienced, and please talk into them if you can.
Yeah, I've kind of like the gamut. So, some where I just start bleeding and pass naturally. I had a DNC for one of them, and then the most recent one, I did the Cytotech, and but for that one, I will say, because I was 12 and a half weeks, the doctor had me do that in labor and delivery. And that's something, and I haven't talked much about this on Miscarriage Hope Desk yet, but maybe by the time this airs, I'm getting ready to do a whole series on that, because I had not done the pill before, and going through that, I actually, in the hospital, the experience, it's a crappy experience, but it was a really healing, like positive in the way it could be positive, the experience was. But I think it was because I was in the hospital. I had a nurse like by my side telling me what to expect, like really like walking me through that. Had I been at home with my kids and on the bathroom floor and like trying to Google things, I just can see how traumatic that can be when you don't know what to expect and you don't know what you're going through. And I also know a lot more what to expect just with having created Miscarriage Hope Desk and hearing so many stories and kind of knowing that. So I kind of knew what I was getting into, but now having gone through it, it really created this passion of like, wow, like there are so many women that like, I was on the border. Like there were people there's women that were in, my position at my time that probably were sent home,
Yeah.
and, women that are like, oh, they're 11 weeks. And like, what's the difference? Like, how did they come up with that cutoff? But it can just, that's one where I did have a good experience, but I can see how it could be really not, I can see how awful it could be, just in having experienced that. So yeah, I definitely have had a range of different to go through it. And yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, and that experience sounds, really different from all the experiences I've heard of with the pill, because most women do it on their own. They get sent home, they pass out on the toilet, or they bleed so much that they're like in the bathtub and they don't know what to do. And a lot of it is just these layers of trauma because they didn't know, because you just don't get warned enough. And I think it's really beautiful that they actually like had someone with you talking you through it and being there. And maybe, I mean, even if the hospital can't do that because maybe they've got full rooms or something like that, maybe they should start actually saying to people, you should look into loss doulas, you should look into having someone with you, or maybe they should even have a program where they have that, especially because it seems like there is actually quite a lot of loss, like a lot of pregnancy loss going on. Even more so now. I don't know if you've seen the stats, but they're really skyrocketing in a way that's just so devastating to even think about. Maybe they need to set that up. Like we should all just like start this onslaught of emails. Do this. But just having that support would have been amazing for many of these women who were just terrified and traumatized because no one no one told them what to expect or what to look for, you know, and some of them ended up in hospital and on you know, a drip and getting blood.
Yeah.
And yeah, because they lost too much.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just insane. I'm so glad that you were actually looked after, because it's rare from my experience.
No, and I know that's why I was kind of surprised. And honestly, because I'd gone through the DNC and I have even articles on my site that are all about, you know, like DNC versus, you know, what the different options are. And I've always been kind of pro DNC. And of course, Facebook groups. And before I went in for it, because my doctor really wanted me to do that process versus a DNC. And every place I looked, my site, other sites, you know, any board, like people in the situation I was in, everyone was like recommending the DNC. The thing I will say for having gone through the process I went through is there was a healing element to it, and the fact that like I was there for it, I experienced it. It really is similar. And maybe it was different for me too, because I had already gone through like a birth, like a live birth. So like, because there are similar feelings within your body. Like you do have some, you know, mild contractions and things like that, which was really overwhelming and scary for me in the past when I'd considered that. But like this time, you know, I kind of knew what that could be like. And, but there's just like something really healing to like being there for the whole process and actually like getting to see the baby and hold the baby, and kind of, it just helps you to process it. And I found more than anything, it was actually very healing for my husband, because they're not, a miscarriage is so hard for them to, I mean, pregnancy in general is hard for the male partner to like connect with, because they're not really a part of that very much. And so, you know, miscarriage and loss, it's hard for them to really understand it. And I think with this one, he really understood it on a much deeper level, and like he was a part of it, you know, he really experienced it right alongside with me. And while it was really hard and difficult for him, it was also, I think, healing for him as well to like be there for that. So it felt you know, more natural almost in a way than just going in for a DNC, which again, like there are definitely pros to that, of just like going in, they knock you out, it's done. And so yeah, pros and cons to each.
Yeah, I think I definitely resonate with what you're saying. Like when you've had a baby, you do know a little bit more of what's going on. Like I didn't know what to expect with my miscarriages, but the first one, my body didn't really know what was going on. I knew I was miscarrying at 6 weeks, but my body didn't get to that natural miscarriage point where it was getting rid of it until 14 weeks.
Oh my
So
gosh.
I opted for natural because I was like, oh yeah, 3 weeks, because that's what they told me.
Yeah.
Week 14, I was like, okay, great. But I knew what was happening. Like the contractions started and I was like, are you
Here we go.
like, I knew. I was like, this is ridiculous. What are you talking about? I don't have a baby. This is not fair. But yeah, and then you sort of go through the process. But I think because I had already been through pregnancies, I was like, I know what this is. It was kind of like a knowing and an understanding. I wasn't terrified of it. Because I knew it would end, and I knew it wouldn't go forever, and I knew it would go even shorter than normal because, you know, it wasn't you know, a full grown baby or anything. So I knew it was going to be easier. It was still really painful and horrible, but yeah, you kind of have there's a knowing a little bit more so, I think. And I think if I'd had that first, I think I would have been pretty terrified. And I mean, even doing that, it was mortifying because, you know, at the end, you have this thing, which for me was just a sack. So it's like looking at something from Aliens or something. It was really weird.
Yeah.
But
no, but I also think with that process, like, and I know there's so many different, you know, experiences, but like while I was there, like I kind of came to this acceptance, like not that it's what I wanted. It's still like, I would still say that's not what I wanted at all. But I think there was also like, this is happening and an acceptance. And I think that that's just so true. Like whether you're going into a surgery, like it can be anything related to your body, but like you kind of have to accept what's going on so that your body, like you have to be in line with that, or your body's gonna like listen to you and like resist that and reject that. And so like in my bleeding, like I did not bleed much. It like everything just like right, just kind of all was like very smooth. But I think it is because I accepted it and allowed my body to go through it. And I don't even know, part of it was like, how did you do that? Like, it's like, I was almost like, I was pretty calm throughout the process. And I feel like a lot of the grief and upset came like later in the like weeks and months that followed, but during the actual time, it's like, and I did have them. So it was interesting. I had gone in the day and didn't have the heartbeat on the ultrasound. And the next day I actually asked them, I said, can you redo the ultrasound? It's like, I needed to see one more time. That like, I think for me, like I needed to see that, like, hey, it wasn't just a glitch. So I was like, I don't know, like your mind plays all sorts of tricks on you in moments like these. And so luckily the doctor, he totally got it and he brought it up, and it was a whole process. And I'm sure it ended up costing me more money, but I think because I did that and like requested that, it allowed me to like really be like, hey, like not what I want, but I'm going to accept it and allow it. And, but that is a good point though, of like, you can ask and request for things all the time. Like when you're in a hospital, if you're ever not comfortable with anything, if you want something differently, like make the request, because a lot of times they won't tell you when things are options. They won't say, hey, this is an option. They'll just say, you have to do this. But there's so much in there, like there's nothing that you have to do. You can always use your voice, which is so important during fertility, especially during birth, but like all the times. And I've gotten better about advocating for myself having gone through this, because there's been times where I'm shy and I don't want to speak up or don't want to question things or don't want to ask a silly question. And now I don't care. I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to make the request.
Yeah, and I think we have to, someone said to me that, no one's going to advocate for us as much as we will, because no offense to people, but no one cares about you more than you, like in terms of you, like being able to live and survive. So, yeah, I think just holding on to that and just realizing that, you have a right to say something about your own body and your own health.
And so many times, like there's things that you feel like you have a feeling or an intuition about something, and there are actually some doctors that are more tuned in with that and they like have some like intuition on that, but like you've got to speak up when if there's something that's you're like really nagging you, like in your pregnancy and you're like, this thing's bothering me, or this thing, I feel like this thing might be off, like go and make the rest for that. Listen to that, like you're the one that's living in your bodies.
Can we go a little bit back to when you did go through that birth? You said that you were able to hold the baby. So did you actually hold the 12-week baby? Was it 12-week? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And that's something, oh gosh, there's a group that I've met with now that they're making these little miscarriage boxes that has an image of like different weeks of pregnancy and what to expect in terms of size and like what the baby will look like. So even if you're sent home, it's kind of like this kit of like, here's what to expect, what it might look like. It's actually not going to be just like a period. It's different. And yeah, the nurse that we had was just, there's so many amazing nurses out there, but was just amazing in terms of kind of coaching us through it. And then, but yeah, they had a little, let us hold her and talk to her. We had a name and, did paperwork. And then, there was just a whole process there. And I think that was just so important for that healing and grieving process to like have that time where me and my husband, got to like hold her and be with her. I think, and even if someone's earlier on than 12 weeks and miscarrying at home, I think that can happen, but there really to be some education in what that can look like, and like know that's a possibility. Because I think in the moment that's hard to think through, like, oh, I should do this, but if given the opportunity, I think, and it was treated a lot more as if, again, like there's just this border, like here's this line and they kind of have to arbitrarily set it. But, like a later loss, like a second a second trimester miscarriage or, you know, like a stillbirth. And I think in terms of labor and delivery, they treated a lot more like a loss like that. But there was so much kind of respect in them doing it like that. And it made me think that miscarriages should be treated a lot more like a later term loss. At least that's my interpretation of what happened. And I think that just really felt so good to me, but also just helped within my, you know, healing process. So it was, I mean, again, horrible experience, but actually like that part of it was as positive as it could have been.
Yeah, it sounds like the hospital actually gave you a lot of validation, like just through that process of actually having someone, you know, care for you through that loss, and getting to that point.
Yeah.
You got to meet her. Would you say that there's a difference between your earlier miscarriages and that one where you actually held her, like emotionally and physically?
Yeah, and it's hard to say too, because, you know, yes, the different weeks, they're all different, but like the way I've experienced each miscarriage is so different. And it's not just week was I at, it's like what headspace was I in. Yes, it's different because I had kids, but also it was harder because I had kids, because my 4-year-old still asks about, you know what I mean? So there's all these complications and different, you know, nuances that happen with each one. And I think sometimes, you know, a 6-week loss can be just as devastating as a 14 or 18, you know, just because circumstances can be so different into that pregnancy. And at the end of the day, I mean, every miscarriage is a loss, and it all carries with it, you know, sadness and grief, even if they're experienced differently.
Yeah, I know what you mean about the 4-year-old as well. My daughter is 4, and
Okay.
yeah, she just kept saying, you know, about the baby in my tummy, and I was like, well, that, you know, that baby passed away, and I just had to keep telling her, and it did stick, but it took a little bit of time and reminding and reliving.
I don't feel like mine asked a lot, but it was more like he would bring it up and it would always catch me off guard. And then I would just like, "Ooh," I would just lose it, which there's nothing wrong. Like he can see that I'm sad about it, but it would just like catch me off guard that he would bring it up, or like the things say about like the pregnancy or about the baby. And yeah, it's interesting the minds of little one, how they work.
Yeah, and like I'm 22 weeks right now, and my daughter, she said to me, oh, I really wish we had the other babies as well. And that was just like, and I said, well, you know, if we'd had them, then we wouldn't be having this baby. I said, because all of them I've had within the same space of time of one pregnancy. And she was like, oh, and I was like, yeah, so it's sad. I said, but they're in heaven, and this one, you know, we wouldn't be having her if we were having those two. So I think this one's supposed to be here. And she was like, okay. And the date thing got me as well, because I'm due the day I pass the sack.
Wow.
I feel really weird about it because yeah, it's just so linked. But how was that for you? Because we did touch on it, but like that must have felt very surreal, like having your due date come up and then you're having this baby.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think when moments like that happen, it just, to me, it proves that there's like, I'm not in control of this life, you know, like to me, that proves that there's a God out there, you know, like, I mean, it just, the world, like you, as much as you try and control and like, you know, oh, I'm gonna have this plan and this many kids and this timing and this date and whatever, like I am not in control. But sometimes that's okay. Like sometimes a lot more magical comes together in this really beautiful way. Like I said, I never would have even thought to like plan to be like, oh, well, you lost this one, but let me just give you one on the due date. Like who to do that? I don't know, but it just feels really, I don't know. It makes life feel like it's worth living or something. I don't know. There's something there really beautiful, I think. So,
No, I
yeah.
think that's a lovely way to look at it. And I think for me, I mean, going through loss, I sort of said to my husband, I was like, I don't know how people get through this without God. Like, I'm struggling so much, and just believing that he'll make good of this makes me, feel a little bit better. Like, because I feel awful right now. He was just like, yeah, that's fair. But yeah, how have you found your faith? Like how has your faith been during this whole time where you've sort of been going through loss? You've been having these amazing miracles and then going through loss again.
Yeah, I think really it really I mean, it strengthened it. And this last loss, I think in some ways I could have like it really challenged it and like made me lose faith, but I don't know why it didn't, but it really, I think, strengthened it again, just because I think because of what happened last time with that loss, it felt so unbearable. It like turned into something so beautiful that I'm just having faith that this time will, do the same. And I don't know what that means. I don't know what my story looks like. So, last time when I did have that faith, like, again, it did work out. And you can only see that by looking in the rearview mirror, like I can't see it moving forward, but I can look back and be reminded of what can happen. And I just have to kind of hold on to that in terms of my faith, I think.
Yeah, I love that. We don't know what our lives look like. It's so true. I have this book for kids called The Three Trees, and it's basically these three trees have these dreams of what they want to be, and then each one ends up being something different than what they expected, but still kind of similar. Like the first one is like, oh, I want to be a treasure box. I want to be the best. I want to hold the most riches, in the world or whatever. And then it actually gets turned into a trough for animals to feed from. And then it ends up holding baby Jesus. So yeah, so the whole story is like that. But it really touched me in a way. I was like, wow, this is for kids, but I feel something from this. And it's just that whole idea of we don't know where we're gonna go, who we're meant to be, or what we go through. Only God knows that. And then when we get to the end, we'll have hindsight. We'll look back and we'll be like, oh wow, it's amazing. And I've seen so many women who come through the other side, once they've finished, they've closed that door, they're like, I'm done. And they've got contentment. So many women have contentment at the end. And I just, I can't see it any other way than, God's sort of way of, making something horrible into something beautiful, where you still, you have something and you have that contentment at the end. Because I mean, there's plenty of people who have kids and have no problem having kids and they're not content. I don't.
Yeah, true. I know.
But often in this community, when that door is closed and they have had either adopted kids or surrogate, assisted kids or their own kids, all of that, there is their contentment. It doesn't even matter, how they had those kids. There's contentment there. So yeah, I think there's something to be said about that. But life is strange. Life is so strange. And it's amazing.
I know, we're talking for thousands of miles apart, and here we are connecting.
And it's it's been getting to me, because I'm just like, I just want to hug you all, but I can't, because we're like not. We're chatting and we're talking, we're face to face, but we can't I want to embrace you all. And I usually always cry at the end, because I'm like, I don't want to say goodbye to you, because you're so wonderful. And we would be best friends. It's that like kid mentality, like when you're in nursery or something and you're like, we're best friends, we get on so well. But yeah, it's that marrying of experiences, because we've been through something that we can connect with, and we understand what it feels like. And I think it's really hard, because obviously in your day-to-day life you don't have that as much, and we have our husbands, but they can be good. They can be good, but sometimes not as helpful. How has
Yeah.
your relationship been? How has your husband been during these seasons?
Yeah, now we are better than ever. There were times, and I'm trying to think, during the IVF period, I think was when we really struggled, because I wasn't sure that I wanted to even do that, and he did. So there was some conflict there. And just like, I was struggling a lot. Like it's just so emotional that, and sometimes I think he got the brunt of it. So there were definitely some ups and downs. There were some couples therapy and all of that. But, current day, like now we're better than ever. And we do talk about that, how like, I think we just celebrated 7 years marriage, but we feel like we've been through so much more and we're just like so strong and solid that I'm sure plenty of people get to year 7 and think they're strong and solid, but I think we just in our heart know that like, oh no, we are. I don't know. It just feels like it's next level strong and solid with everything we've been through. And, I think getting to see each other be parents is just the coolest experience ever. And, going back to your thing of like, I just think we appreciate it on this level that we never had it not been such a struggle to hear that. I think we just both really appreciate being a parent and having kids and being a family, that we're just really happy with it, And I mean, don't get me wrong, there's, there's plenty of, 7:30 trying to get them into bed, 2 toddlers melting down, like it's not always roses, but
Yeah, it's still
for the most part, we're good.
Yeah, it's still motherhood, and yes, you may get your rainbow and you may feel content, but obviously there's still going to be moments where things are like, seriously, come on, and shouting and stuff. Just life. But that's really lovely. So where are you guys sort of at now? Like, what are your plans?
We are still in the kind of decision-making mode of I think we're like 3 or 4 months out from that last loss. So I think we're still kind of letting that settle. Like I still, I'm not even to where my due date would have been. And I think for some reason, like sometimes it feels like you have to get through like where that due date would have been to feel like, okay, that's in my past. Cause I still think back like, oh, right, I would be pregnant today. And those, so yeah, I think I'm trying not to like make final decisions because I know that I don't want to, and you can always say something and go back on it, but I'm not the type of personality that does that. I usually am pretty strong in like my decisions. So I know that I'm not ready to make a final decision. I think we could both definitely see adoption being in our future. So that's something we do have, one adopted son. And we always thought that we would, actually, even before we started trying, we always thought we would adopt. So that was interesting that like we thought that would be part of our story even before we started having fertility issues. And when we adopted him, we always thought we'd at least adopt 2 so that if we did have biological kid or kids, there'd be 2 adopted ones and they'd have a sibling that could relate to them in that way. So yeah, I don't think our story's over just yet.
Yeah, that's lovely. And it's so great that you already had those thoughts of, adopting and all that as well. Yeah, it's strange. Like some people will have that and they'll have that conversation beforehand, and then other people will be like, I'm not really comfortable doing that. Like it's not really right for me, and it just it's very interesting, like what people are called to do. But yeah, you're right. That is amazing that you had that conversation and it was part of your story, and it is part of your story, and it may be again. So that would be that's lovely. So I'll keep in touch and have a look and keep an eye on your story, and
never know.
And hopefully it'll happen nice and quickly, just like last time, because I've heard like it takes ages, like 2 years or something to get to have.
And there's so many stories, like because sometimes you can get matched, and I even have a friend and had a baby for a while, and then the mom changed her mind, and so you can just have so many different experiences. Like it can be the same ups and downs as you have in a fertility journey of like you just don't know what you're getting into. So you just don't know.
Well, on a final note, is there anything that you would want to say to anyone who's maybe in the throes of it right now, going through loss, going through fertility treatments or anything like that? Yeah, any words of advice at all?
Not advice, but I do think it is always helpful just to hear the words like you are not alone and like you're okay. But you're not alone. Like there's so many, I'm sure there were pieces of my story that no matter what you're going through, maybe you could relate to, but like there's other women out there that are going through, it may feel like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like this happened, but there's other women that are having similar struggles. So like finding ways to connect through them, whether it's, a Facebook group or an Instagram account or, but if you can find, or locally, sometimes talk about what you're going through if you're comfortable, and you'd be surprised that you might find out a neighbor or a friend or a family member has been through something similar and you didn't even know about it. So having some conversations can help to get connected as well, but it can be very lonely. So I think it's good for people to hear that they're not alone,
Yeah, so true. And just before we go, I just want to say a few more things about your Miscarriage Hope Desk, just so people know a little bit more information before we come off here, so they've got somewhere to go. So please, just anything that you feel like is really important to just tell people about what you've got going on. That would be helpful. That would be amazing.
So all of the things I'm going to talk about are like at Miscarriage Hope Desk. So I'll throw that out there. The website for like the research articles that go in depth on all of the different issues related and surrounding miscarriage. So the website for that. We've got a podcast, Instagram account, a Facebook group, and then we have 2 programs. One is Moving Forward, that's like helping to make those decisions. Like I'm actually revisiting the program right now to help make the decision of like, do I want to continue on or not? So if anyone's struggling with that decision making and like what to do after a loss, there's the Moving Forward program. There's also a pregnancy after loss program. So if anyone is pregnant but has experienced loss in the past, it helps you get past the fear and anxiety and like actually enjoy your pregnancy. So that's the second program there. I think that's most of the resources. Oh, newsletter. So there's a newsletter as well that I would that I write, and if you want to get plugged in, that's a good way as well. And like I said, we're at Miscarriage Hope Desk. So
wonderful. And do you do the courses yourself? Are they you or are they someone else?
The programs, yeah, I created them, and then I get people to like add, like I have a therapist that kind of like added a section, and so I have other people that kind of add to it, but they're all created as like, here's what I needed, here's what was helpful to me, hopefully it's helpful to you. That sort of, yes, very firsthand. This is what I would have done.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I'm glad you're doing it yourself, like just to get your mindset, in the right place. It's amazing how we do that. Like we've almost set ourselves up like with things that we've written or things that we've created, and then we're like, I should look back at that. Like that's going to help me right now in this moment. Yes. That's really lovely. But thank you so much. And thank you so much for creating those resources and making this horrible experience a little bit easier and more hopeful and just less alone.
Well, thank you. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate you waking up early to talk to me.
Oh, I honestly, this is like my therapy, talking to all you lovely ladies who are doing amazing things. I'm just like, I'm going to talk to this lady. And like at first, sometimes I was just like, I don't know if I want to talk to anyone. It's just so sad. And, but yeah, I really look forward to the conversations and meeting you guys and crying with you or laughing with you. And yeah, so much love.
Yes. An amazing work.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Please note that all speakers, including experts and professionals, express information, views, and opinions that should not be used to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any medical conditions. If you have a medical issue, please consult a qualified professional. Speakers voice their own views, opinions, and conclusions, and they may not reflect the views, opinions, and conclusions of other speakers. Ella Rose, The Joy of Sunflowers, and its sponsors may not endorse all or any of the views, opinions, or conclusions expressed.